Senator Ludlam.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. Look, I would like to put some remarks on the record about a project that's been very close to my heart, actually, since my election campaign in 2007, and that is the project to bring light rail back to the streets of the city of Perth. Perth had an extensive tram network before the Second World War that was laid down in the last years of the 19th century and actually transported residents of Perth between the wars, and was then progressively neglected and dismantled, and the last tram ran in the late 1950s. Since then, transport advocates across the city have been proposing to bring this much-loved public transport mode back to the streets of Perth. And so our campaign in 2007 built on more than a decade's work by the Greens WA, by local government authorities who are the ones on the front line of traffic congestion and planning issues in Perth, and transport advocates, people like Professor Peter Newman from Curtin University, who has made it his life's work to improve public transport and amenity for the residents of the city of Perth. The ALP, the state ALP, particularly Planning and Transport Minister Elena McTiernan, had a plan on the books for a short section of light rail east-west through the city of Perth just before they lost government in 2004, and so we wonder what might have been had there not been a change of government at that time. But we launched our plan in 2007, and it was deliberately ambitious. And we made three main calls on state government and on political parties of both the old political parties. And our three main calls were to make this a network for the whole city, not just Nedlands to Victoria Park, but something that paid strong regard to the fact that transport vulnerability is greatest the further you get from the central business district. And that's not just a pattern of Perth, but that is notable of all Australia's great cities. So we wanted a network that served the whole town. The second call was that it should be powered by renewable energy. Electrified public transport, as is happening in other cities around the world, allows you to get not just out of oil, but out of fossil fuel entirely. And there are cities in Europe and North America that contract their entire electricity bill to wind developers and run public transport on the power of the wind. And our third call was that this was urgent and that we cannot afford to wait decades to bring light rail back to Perth. We need this now. So we've spent 4.5 years working with local government authorities, and particularly with WALGA, who have been great supporters of public transport. We've worked with transport advocates and academics. In particular, we've worked with industry and people who build these systems elsewhere in Australia and the world. We've worked with transport and planning officials in state government, and we've worked with ordinary people and extraordinary people at public meetings and in every possible interaction and presentation around the city of Perth. And over 4 years we built the case. And the reason that we've done that is because light rail isn't just a transport mode. If you do it right, it can be a tool for building community. Light rail can be a way of anchoring sustainable urban development that gets people free of car dependence, improves air quality and amenity, gets the city moving, and can provide for a greater density of housing, which in turn can provide genuinely affordable housing, bringing people back towards jobs, services and transport, rather than stranding people on the edges of our great cities far over the horizon and condemning them to transport vulnerability. There's a reason why this technology is playing a central role in urban redevelopment all around the world, but notably including places like the Gold Coast, Adelaide and Sydney here in Australia, and it's because of that city-building potential. And I'm extremely proud to say we succeeded. After many delays, the Premier of Western Australia announced a 20-year transport strategy, which was dubbed the 19-year transport strategy by the time it arrived, and foreshadowed, as he put it, a decade of light rail for Perth. The indicative maps were something of a mixed bag. Some of Professor Newman's team's Knowledge Arc, which was proposed to connect two great universities of UWA and Curtin University with a link through the central business district and down to some of the large hospitals. Part of that is in the plan, and also a northern spur through Mirrabooka out to Balga in Perth's northern suburbs, which are in fact extremely poorly served by public transport at this stage. They got the tick, and that's worth acknowledging and celebrating. But of course there was nothing proposed for the south or east of the city for decades to come. The great work of the cities of Fremantle, Melville and Coburn. I'll particularly pay tribute to the Mayor of Fremantle, Dr Brad Pettit, who's done an enormous amount of work in ensuring that cities and local town centres don't plan light rail out of existence by planning away the all-important corridors that these vehicles will travel down. That great work, in collaboration with other local government authorities, looks to have been disregarded for the time being. The huge planning effort put in by the Stirling Alliance north of the CBD, where they're proposing to create effectively a second CBD north of Perth, didn't get a look in. So we still have a way to go. I'm extremely optimistic that we will get these plans onto the books, we will get them linked into a light rail system, but we've got a lot of work to do yet. Within a few months, Minister Albanese had pitched in $4 million to assist the planning effort, and it looked as though the project was actually set to get underway. And then, somewhat mystifyingly, the state government announced a 4-year delay in construction start, that it would be 2016 before even stage 1 would begin. So of our 3 key priorities, a whole of metro strategy, a renewable power source and a sense of urgency, it actually looked as though we might have scored 0 from 3. I understand why we can't do it all at once, why you can't simply build out hundreds of kilometres of light rail all at once, but we do need a phased metro-wide system that delivers for people well before the 2031 target date, which seems to be what the state government is hinting at. Certainly in the planning documents, the draft transport planning documents that have been put on the table thus far, it actually tells most of the residents of metropolitan Perth they're going to need to wait until the 2030s before they see anything more than an improved bus service. In a recent Budget Estimates Committee, however, the plot got much more interesting and did actually give me a bit of hope. Quietly, without so much as a Friday afternoon press statement, the Barnett government has made a funding application to Infrastructure Australia for a light rail project. Not a study, but project funding. Now, our team has been advocating for that for 5 years, and it was a very sweet thing to have established. But of course, now I'm even more mystified than before. This is a good project. It's going to be very popular. It's going to get our city moving. And I think it's the kind of infrastructure that, once built, we will look back and wonder how on earth we ever did without it. The politics of it are that this is a green transport project championed by the Greens WA, put into the ground by the Coalition and funded by an ALP minority federal government. Just for a change, everyone is going to have a piece of this win. So why the Barnett government is being so coy about it, I confess is actually something of a mystery. But the sooner we get this project started, the better. Parts of our great city, as with other Australian capital cities, are now paralysed with traffic congestion, and it is becoming very difficult for people even to be able to get to work. And I can still remember a time, having been around and lived in Perth for long enough to remember, when peak hour only went for an hour. And now key parts of our city's freeway network are simply paralysed for hours and hours of every day. The sooner we get started on this project and on the consequential changes that we will need to make to the bus network, that if we get light rail into some of our high-density parts of town, we will then be able to redeploy buses into areas further out, increase frequency, that will increase patronage, and the entire public transport network in Perth will lift. It is time to get on board, and it's time that Perth got its light rail system back.
Senator Singh. Senator McEwen.